And we'd like to give Evelyn Rosenberg, our next presenter, a warm welcome. And congratulations on being a finalist for the Bridge Boulevard Public Art Project. And without further ado, myself and the panelists would like to welcome you, and you can jump right in.
Oh, well, hello. Again, thank you for inviting me to be a finalist. When I first came to Albuquerque many years ago, my first job here was a program from the National Endowment of the Arts called Artists in the Schools, which no longer exists. But I did that for 2 years, and I made 7 murals in public schools, elementary, junior high, high school. And it was what got me interested in public art. After this program was over, I developed my technique of doing blasting, and which I'll talk to you about later. And but when I saw this thing advertised, after the pandemic and being so isolated, I thought it would be wonderful to go back to the beginning and try and work with children, and particularly maybe I hear that you're interested in working with elementary school students and even high school students, and to do the more complicated work and expose them to, and I've made over 40 public art pieces, and so expose them to how to work as an artist and maybe encourage them to think about that in their later career, or at least, or to have fun. So what I want to show you is what I'm proposing, explain a little bit about it, and then take your questions. So I'm going to hope that this all works. So here is my share. Okay, is the screen share coming up? Oh, okay. Oh dear, wait a minute. You were covering up my, okay. So now this is my proposal, simplified. So I was interested in the South Valley, of course, has a very long history of both a Hispanic tradition, American Indian, Native American tradition, and lately more Anglo tradition. But what goes through all of the culture is an agricultural tradition. And I live in the North Valley, and I have goats living next door and a horse living next door over there. And so I understand that kind of connection. And so what I wanted to do, the wall is 6 feet tall, and it's going to be covered with a stucco finish, a brown stucco finish. So what I wanted to do was have cutouts of children, animals, plants along the wall. They would be 3-dimensional, and I'll show you how I'm going to do it in 3-dimensional form, sitting on the wall, peeking over the wall, hiding behind the wall. And and I would use all different kinds of techniques to create these figures. I would use cutout steel. I would use my technique, which I use blasting. I'll show you examples of that. Painted steel, all different kinds of metal. And I'll show you some examples. This is the piece that you probably know that I've done in the South Valley, which is called Carousel de San Isidro. And when I proposed the piece for, it wasn't quite like this, but they were the committee was very worried about graffiti. And so I had a big meeting with some kids from Rio Grande High School. And I asked them, well, now, what would you propose that I put there that you guys would not graffiti? And they said, well, what they said at first, they said, well, put Our Lady of Guadalupe. Well, I couldn't put Our Lady of Guadalupe because that didn't, it was too religious a symbol for the public art program. But instead, I took the story of San Isidro, which was a folkloric tale, which was very popular in the Valley, and they had even a San Isidro Day. And actually, when we dedicated the piece, they brought the little San Isidro from the church and did a blessing. It was really nice. So, and this piece has now been up there for quite a long time, I think almost over 10 years. And it has not had any graffiti. And the only thing I had, it's maintained its color and everything quite well, because these pieces are all coated. I'll tell you about how I coat them later. And the only thing that I've had to do is there were some chips on the cement columns, which have, and I came back and repaired those maybe 3 or 4 years ago. This is another piece which I did in Bernalillo County, but it's in the North Valley, actually quite near where I live. And this is a piece made of steel and stainless steel and patinaed steel and painted metal. And you can see that I'm going to, wait a minute. This is before I installed it in my driveway where I was working on it. And you can see that I made, it has all different kinds of metal, including some of my, this is my piece of the blasting material. And I put all kinds of different patinas on the metal. In fact, to like make the fur of the bear, I took some of these little leaves and junk that was on the side of the my driveway and put it on the bear and set it on fire to create this kind of fuzzy look for the bear. And this is, and then this is a piece that I made in Denver at the National Western Stock Show, and it was 300 feet long, and it was all kinds of animals. And there was a herd of cows, a flock of sheep, some pigs, some goats. And I also, because it was such a long piece, I did some of the pieces in cutouts. You can see this is their symbol, the National Western Stock Show. So I did some sheep and some cows and a horse, and in cutouts which were powder coated, the steel and were powder coated. I'll show you some examples of those in a little bit. And so when I make my things with the explosive technique, I can create all kinds of textures on the surface. And I can use all kinds of materials to create those textures. Like for this sheep, I used popcorn on his body. And this cow, I think I used something, it was a kind of, you know, that excelsior that, you know, you put in plants. And on this pig, I used kitty litter to make his piggy skin. And these are all real plants that I use. And these were real children that I pushed into clay, and I'll show you how I do that a little later. And these were their real clothes and everything that I blasted. Obviously, I didn't blast the children, but I put the, I pushed them in clay and then made a mold. Uh-oh, what happened? It went all the way back. Why did it do that? Okay. And here's another piece that I did for an elementary school in Montgomery County, Maryland, which was called the alphabet tree. And again, I took children and pushed them into clay and transferred their bodies. They really like to do this. It's not scary. It's really fun. And I drew the animals, and then these were kinds of cutout letters that you get like from Hobby Lobby, which I pushed into the clay. And these were real leaves that I blasted. And sometimes when the blasting is very expensive and it goes up all the time. Every time I go there, they charge me more. So I've had to find ways around using the blasting all the time, but to get those kinds of colors and stuff that I've developed using patinas. So sometimes I just use patinas to create the design on the surface. This frog is made entirely in copper. I think it's on brass, but it's using only patinas on the surface to create the frog. And this is an outside piece, and it's been up, I think, over 10 years also, and has not faded. And there were 37 panels on this piece, some blasted, some not. And the outside of the piece, which is aluminum, all this design was created with a surface, different kind of surfacing materials to create this pattern. And I would do this, like, for instance, I could do the sheep. I could do the sheep out of stainless steel and make his fur using this kind of patterning. It's not fur, wool, using this kind of patterning technique. This is another piece of patina. This is all patinas, just to show you the variety you can get, and you can use real leaves and all kinds of things. This is a tabletop, which I made for my house, and it's 10 feet long by 3 feet wide. And this is one of the pieces that I did back in the day with the artists in the schools. This was, I think it was Garfield Elementary, anyway, and when I had the students project their image on the wall, and then I drew around them, and then they painted themselves in. And these little, then I did the little bears and stuff. And this is the thing we painted on the giraffe house. These were high school kids. And I had them paint all it's cinder block building. I had them paint all the blocks, and then I drew the giraffe's head, and then they filled them in. Now, the one thing about this wall too is this wall butts up against a private house. I believe it looks like a private house, which is right behind it. And so it's important that the back of the wall also look good, because you don't want the people just looking at something ugly. And so I would finish off the back of the wall as well. And if you see, I bolted, I'll bolt everything to the wall, and it'll be bolted from, oh my goodness. I'm turning off my phone. I just got a call. Oh shoot, just a minute. So I would bolt everything to the wall, both front and back, and they'll come over the wall, like they'll be sitting on the wall, so it'll be bolted to the top of the wall too. So it should be very stable. And of course, these bolts would all be painted black. And so the back of the wall will look as nice, or sort of as nice as the front. And here back is the piece, the front of the wall, and it'll have bolts all along these figures too, and on top of the wall to hold it together. Okay, so I'm gonna go out of this.
Unknown caller.
Oh, shoot. So now I'm gonna show you a little film. Hopefully it works. That this is I've had lots of coverage because of this, you know, people like this explosive technique. And so I've been on television, like in Chinese television, European television, Today Show, all kinds of things. But this is a recent one that was done, and I remarked that I realized that I'm wearing the same shirt that I wore in this film. This was done a couple of years ago by Canadian National Television. And it's maybe not the best one that's ever made, but it shows how I cast figures into clay. So I think it's a good one to show you. Okay, let me make it big. Okay.
Sometimes beauty comes out of destruction. My name is Evelyn Rosenberg, and I'm an artist, and I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Yeah, and I'll put this one over here. I work with all kinds of materials, with clay, with plaster, with metals, and I also work with plastic explosives. About 20 years ago, an Israeli guy showed up from Israel. He was an explosive expert, and he had this idea that maybe you could make art using explosives. And I was hooked. I don't think anybody else is doing it but me, so that's probably pretty unique. Right now, I'm currently working on a private piece. I decided to incorporate my current assistant in this piece, Hillary. I'm going to push her hand in the clay to take a cast of her hand, and eventually we'll put her whole body in the clay and take a cast of her whole body for the final piece. I think it's awesome. Let's go this way. Then I trace the image from that mold. I also put different kinds of sheet metal, in this case aluminum foil and copper, and those will fuse with the plate in the blast, something called Moreau effect. This retards the blast just a microsecond, and so you get this positive image of this material on the top of the plate. And these things will glue themselves to the plate. So that's what we want to happen. So when we lay the metal plate on top of the mold, everything will go exactly in the right place. Way off down here. Yeah, here, this one is way off. Here. It's the critical piece. And then I put everything in the car and I drive down to New Mexico Tech where I do my blasting.
We're going to make this sand bed for the mold to set on.
It's absorbing the impact so the ground doesn't radiate back up into the metal.
If there's an indent of any kind on the sand, the explosion is going to pick that up in the piece. So it's really important to try to keep it as level, flat as possible, just giving love to the sand before the explosion.
I think there's 5 minutes of artistic work and the rest is work. You know? So we put the ester mold on the sand. Okay, now what I'm going to do is this crack, I'm going to fill it in with plaster.
This is an image of my body, and there are absolutely no second thoughts about exploding it. My favorite part is my hands and my feet.
The metal that we put on top becomes the art piece. And so that obviously is the most important piece of the whole process. Now they put the explosive on.
The most of the work is after.
We've done our part.
This is a C1 sheet explosive. There's about 8.5 pounds here.
Then the technicians put the plastic explosives on top of the metal base plate and the mold. So it's a little sandwich. Then he wires it up. The next time we'll see it, hopefully this will be a piece of art and this will be completely gone. How much is your body worth?
Oh, priceless.
Okay. Let's see what happens. Even after all these years, I get excited.
Stand by for countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Blast is traveling at 27,000 feet per second, so it's very fast. Okay, let's see. Oh, wow. Oh, it's good.
Amazing. It's perfect.
Here's your hand. That's enough. Perfect, perfect, perfect. This was the easy part. There's still a lot of work to do. And now it becomes like painting. I'll clean it off and I'll polish up certain parts that I want shiny. I'll add chemicals which color the metal in different ways. I'm treating it with chemicals in order to change the colors on the metal permanently. I wear a hood where I get clean air because these are all really bad chemicals for you. I'll make a finished piece out of it. Well, I hope everybody likes it, of course. Sometimes you have to break things apart in order to put things back together in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, it's good.